Florida sells itself like a vacation brochure that forgot to include the fine print. Palm trees, sunshine, cheap flights, and the illusion that everything south of Orlando is basically a screensaver. But here's the part nobody puts on the billboard. Not every Florida town wants visitors, and some of them actively suggest you keep driving. These are places where locals don't say, "Welcome." They say, "Lock your doors," where gas stations feel less like a pit stop and more like a life choice you'll immediately regret. This list exists because Florida has a weird PR problem. People think danger here looks like hurricanes and alligators. In reality, it's quieter, stranger, and way more human. It's towns where crime stats don't scream, they whisper, and that whisper says, "You should have listened." These aren't war zones. They're functioning towns with schools, churches, grocery stores, and neighbors who know exactly which streets to avoid after sunset, and which gas stations you do not stop at unless you enjoy anxiety as a personality trait. You're going to hear about places that look harmless in daylight, places with normal names, normal houses, and normal vibes right up until something feels off. We're talking towns where locals warn you unprompted, where even Google Maps seems hesitant, and where the safest move is sometimes to just not exist there longer than necessary. Before the comments section turns into a courtroom, no, this is not an attack on Florida as a whole. Florida is massive. Florida is complicated. Florida is a beautiful chaos experiment. But these towns? These are the ones where even Floridians raise an eyebrow and say, "Yeah, maybe don't stop there." Stick around. Like the video if you enjoy uncomfortable truths. Subscribe if you appreciate warnings disguised as entertainment. And remember, curiosity is healthy. Lingering is optional. City 1. Opa-locka, Florida. Opa-locka is what happens when bold architectural ambition collides head-on with reality and loses badly. On paper, this town looks fascinating. Moorish-style buildings, domes, minarets, and a backstory that sounds like a history documentary trying to be quirky. In real life, Opa-locka feels like a place where the vibes are permanently set to something isn't right, and your instincts start pacing before you do. Let's hit the uncomfortable part early. Opa-locka consistently ranks among the most violent cities in Florida relative to its size. We're talking crime rates that make nearby Miami look like it's trying harder. Locals don't sugarcoat it. Ask someone from the area what to do if you're passing through, and the answer is usually some variation of "don't stop." Especially not for gas, especially not at night, and especially not if you look lost. The population sits around 15,000, but the town punches way above its weight when it comes to chaos. It's wedged right next to Miami Gardens and not far from major highways, which means it sees movement, traffic, and problems that never fully move on. The economy struggles. Jobs are limited. Investment has been inconsistent. When opportunity dries up, tension fills the space like humidity. Why is it like this? Years of mismanagement, corruption scandals that sound fictional until you look them up, and a city government that's been in survival mode for decades. That kind of instability doesn't just disappear. It settles in. It shows up in abandoned buildings, underfunded services, and neighborhoods where people learn to mind their business as a survival skill. Living here means adapting fast. You learn which streets are shortcuts and which are traps. You learn that some gas stations are technically open but spiritually closed. You learn that daylight is your friend and nighttime is a negotiation. There are good people here. Families, kids, workers just trying to live, but they live with an awareness that never turns off. Opa-locka isn't dangerous because it's dramatic. It's dangerous because it's tired. And tired places don't have the energy to warn outsiders politely. They just hope you keep driving. City 2. Belle Glade, Florida. Belle Glade looks calm in photos. Flat land, open sky, sugarcane fields stretching forever like Florida decided to cosplay as the Midwest. But don't let the quiet fool you. Belle Glade has a reputation that arrives before you do, and locals will absolutely tell you not to linger unless you have a reason and a plan. This town sits on the edge of Lake Okeechobee and has a population of roughly 18,000. It's small, isolated, and economically boxed in. Agriculture dominates everything here, especially sugarcane, which means seasonal work, inconsistent income, and long stretches of not much happening. When boredom meets stress and opportunity is limited, things get complicated fast. Crime here isn't loud in the way tourists imagine. It's not flashy. It's personal. Belle Glade has long struggled with violent crime rates that don't match its size, and the isolation makes everything feel heavier. There's no nearby metro to absorb problems. What happens here stays here, and everyone knows everyone, which somehow makes it worse. Why is it cheap? Because not many people are lining up to move somewhere that feels forgotten by the rest of the state. Resources are thin. Investment comes and goes. Promises get made and quietly evaporate. When you're surrounded by farmland and water but still feel trapped, that tension doesn't stay theoretical. Living here means understanding the rhythm. Days are slow, nights are slower but sharper. Gas stations aren't social spaces. They're transactional. You don't hang around. You don't wander. You do what you came to do and leave. Locals aren't unfriendly, they're cautious. There's a difference, and outsiders often confuse the two. Belle Glade isn't a place that wants your curiosity. It wants your respect. Ignore that, and the town has a way of reminding you why people warned you in the first place. City 3, Riviera Beach, Florida. Riviera Beach sounds like it should be expensive. The name alone feels like a scam designed to lure unsuspecting beach lovers into a bad decision. And geographically, it almost pulls it off. It sits right next to Palm Beach, one of the wealthiest areas in the country. Million-dollar yachts one direction, crime statistics the other. This city has around 37,000 residents and a violent crime rate that has kept it on the most dangerous lists for years. The contrast is jarring. Cross one street and you're in luxury. Cross another and locals start locking their doors automatically. Riviera Beach is a case study in inequality, living side by side and never speaking. Why is it like this? Long-term economic disparity, underinvestment in certain neighborhoods, and a location that funnels people through without giving them a reason to stay. When a city becomes a pass-through instead of a destination, it develops blind spots. Those blind spots grow teeth. Locals will tell you the same thing. Daytime is manageable, nighttime is optional, and gas stations are not hangout spots. There are specific areas everyone avoids, and the people who live here know exactly where those lines are drawn. Visitors don't. That's where the trouble starts. Living here means living alert. You can hear the ocean, but you can also hear sirens often enough that they blend into the background. The beach is close, but peace is conditional. Riviera Beach isn't pretending to be safe. It just exists next to wealth and lets the contrast do the talking. This is a town that survives in the shadow of luxury, and shadows are where details disappear. City 4, Lake City, Florida. Lake City greets you the way a carnival greets a chiropractor, promising excitement but ultimately reminding you you're going to feel something sharp if you stick around too long. It's the kind of place you might pass on I-75, glance at the name on the exit sign and think, Lake City, that sounds pleasant enough. And then you read the numbers, and suddenly your GPS becomes overly dramatic about rerouting you through Timbuktu instead. Lake City sits in northern Florida, strategically perched where Interstate 75 and US 90 intersect. A crossroads that seems ideal on a map, but feels slightly cursed in reality. With roughly 12,000 residents in the city itself, and a broader county population that's larger but still rooted in small-town rhythms, Lake City makes its notoriety known through its crime statistics, ones that often place it at or near the top of Florida's most violent towns. Let's put it bluntly. If crime rate rankings were a wrestling championship, Lake City would not only be a two-time champ, but also leave the belt on display at the local gas station. Some reports detail violent crime rates in Lake City that are nearly 3 times the national average, with chances of becoming a victim in this town markedly higher than most of Florida's population centers. Yes, even higher than some places you already know locals warn visitors about. So what's going on here? Part of Lake City's predicament is its geography. It's a junction town, the kind of place that sees constant transit traffic but pales in local economic opportunity. There's industry and agriculture around, sure, but not enough jobs or infrastructure growth to keep young people employed, and when opportunities dry up, restlessness starts writing its own RSVP. Combine that with poverty levels that exceed the state average, and you've got a situation where crime doesn't so much happen as evolve organically. This is not a clickbait exaggeration or a sensationalist headline. Lake City's crime figures don't just tick upward. They've historically clung stubbornly to elevated levels, with aggravated assaults, robberies, and other violent offenses significantly above what you'd expect for its size. Locals, the ones who've lived here long enough to know which streets make their teeth itch, will tell you that this isn't about scenery or sidewalks. It's about survival strategy. Don't look lost. Don't stop anywhere that doesn't have multiple cameras. And absolutely don't treat gas station parking lots like destinations. Life here isn't uniformly grim. There are schools, families, and community efforts pushing for change, but that community resilience doubles as a warning label. Being in Lake City at dusk feels different than being there at noon. Night turns the volume up on every uneasy whisper in your brain. The locals? They've already read the room, and they're suggesting you keep rolling. Because in Lake City, you're always one wrong turn away from learning the hard way why they say that. City 5. Florida City, Florida. Florida City is the last stop before the Everglades, which feels poetic until you realize it's also where caution signs stop being suggestions and start being survival advice. On a map, it looks like a gateway town. Beaches nearby, national parks close, palm trees everywhere. In real life, Florida City has a reputation that locals deliver bluntly. Pass through, don't linger, and absolutely don't stop for gas unless you're already committed to the decision. This town sits at the southern edge of Miami-Dade County with a population hovering around 12,000. It's small, boxed in, and surrounded by highways that funnel tourists, truckers, and lost drivers straight through it. That constant movement paired with limited economic opportunity creates a strange tension, like a place that's always busy but never really thriving. Florida City consistently shows up in violent crime rankings that don't match its size, which is usually your first red flag. The crime profile here isn't subtle. Robberies, assaults, and car-related crimes have been persistent issues, and the town's proximity to major travel routes doesn't help. When you mix transient traffic with poverty, limited resources, and a community stretched thin, crime stops being random and starts feeling patterned. Locals know which blocks to avoid, which gas stations feel sketchy even at noon, and which intersections make you grip the steering wheel a little tighter. Why is it like this? Part of it is economics. Florida City struggles with higher than average poverty rates and fewer stable job opportunities compared to nearby metro areas. Development often skips over it on the way to somewhere shinier. When a town becomes a corridor instead of a destination, it develops blind spots, places where people exist without being fully seen or supported. Those blind spots don't stay quiet forever. Living here means operating with awareness turned all the way up. Daytime is functional. Nighttime is when the town's reputation earns its keep. Gas stations here are not casual pit stops. They're transactional, fast, and eyes forward. You don't scroll your phone. You don't wander. You get in, get out, and pretend your tank magically filled itself somewhere else. What makes Florida City unsettling isn't chaos. It's familiarity. Everything looks normal enough to lower your guard. Normal streets, normal houses, normal businesses. And that's where people make mistakes. The town doesn't announce danger with sirens and warning signs. It lets you assume safety and then quietly challenges that assumption. There are good people here. Families, workers, kids growing up knowing exactly where they shouldn't be after dark. But even they'll tell you this isn't a town built for visitors to hang around. Florida City isn't evil, dramatic, or collapsing. It's strained. And strained places don't have patience for curiosity. If you're passing through, pass through. Florida City isn't offended when you keep driving. In fact, it kind of prefers it. City 6, Mangonia Park. Mangonia Park is proof that size does not equal safety. In fact, sometimes it's the opposite. This town is so small you can miss it without blinking. Yet its crime statistics manage to scream louder than cities 10 times its size. If Florida had a "how is this even possible" category, Mangonia Park would be the case study. We're talking about a town with roughly 2,000 people. That's not a city. That's a large apartment complex with a zip code. And yet, Mangonia Park routinely ranks near the top of Florida's violent crime lists on a per capita basis. Which means mathematically, this place is doing the most with the least. And not in a way you want to applaud. Geographically, Mangonia Park sits in Palm Beach County, wedged between West Palm Beach and Riviera Beach. Translation: it's surrounded by movement, traffic, and economic contrast. Wealthy areas aren't far. Neither are struggling ones. When a tiny town gets sandwiched between bigger cities with bigger problems, it tends to absorb pressure like a sponge that never gets wrung out. Why is it so bad for its size? Because per capita crime doesn't care about vibes. A handful of violent incidents in a small population explodes the statistics, and Mangonia Park has had enough of those to build a reputation that locals don't argue with. Assaults, robberies, and incidents that make police blotters read like bad luck instead of coincidence. When a town this small develops a pattern, it stops feeling random. Living here means everyone knows everything, and that somehow makes things worse. There's no anonymity, but there's also no escape. Disputes don't dissolve, they recycle. Tension doesn't fade, it just waits. And when you combine that with limited economic opportunity and aging infrastructure, you get a place where frustration has nowhere to go except outward. Gas stations here are not community hubs. They're places you visit with purpose and leave without delay. You don't browse, you don't loiter, you don't stand there debating snacks like this is a road trip memory. Locals treat these spots like loading zones for survival. Outsiders who treat them casually stand out immediately, and standing out is not a recommended activity. What makes Mangonia Park unsettling isn't constant chaos. It's the silence between it. Streets can feel empty. Too empty. The kind of empty where you start hearing your own thoughts and none of them are reassuring. There's no tourist distraction here, no beach energy to soften the edges. Just a small grid of streets carrying way more tension than they were designed for. There are people here trying to live normal lives. Families, workers, kids riding bikes during daylight hours. But even they operate with an awareness that never turns off. Doors lock early. Errands are timed. Familiarity becomes a form of armor. Mangonia Park doesn't warn you with signs. It lets the numbers do the talking. And if locals tell you not to stop for gas here, it's not paranoia. It's pattern recognition. City 7. Medley. Medley is one of those places you didn't know existed until you accidentally ended up there, and then immediately wondered if that was a mistake. This town doesn't look dangerous in a cinematic way. There are no dramatic skylines, no crumbling downtowns, no obvious warning signs. What Medley has instead is something far more unsettling. Industrial silence and crime statistics that do not match the vibe. Medley's population hovers around 900 people. Yes, 900. That's not a town, that's a group chat with traffic lights. And yet, Medley routinely shows up on lists of Florida's most dangerous places, based on violent crime per capita. When a town this small starts ranking alongside places 10 or 20 times its size, your instincts should start filing paperwork. Geographically, Medley sits in northwest Miami-Dade County, surrounded by warehouses, trucking routes, rail lines, and industrial zones. It's less neighborhood and more logistics hub that accidentally incorporated. During the day, it feels quiet, almost empty. Trucks move, forklifts hum. Everything feels transactional. At night, that emptiness doesn't go away. It just gets louder in your head. So why does Medley show up in crime rankings so often? Part of it is math. A small population means even a handful of violent incidents sends the per capita numbers into orbit. But part of it is function. Medley isn't built for residents, walking dogs, or strolling to coffee shops. It's built for movement, storage, and labor. Places designed without community spaces tend to develop blind corners, physical and social, where accountability thins out. Living here means existing in the margins of Miami's massive economic engine without fully benefiting from it. Jobs are nearby, but not always stable. Traffic passes through but doesn't stay. When a place is constantly being used but rarely cared for, tension finds places to sit. And in Medley, it sits quietly, like it's waiting for you to forget it's there. Gas stations in Medley feel different. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just off. The lighting is harsh. The parking lots feel oversized and empty at the same time. You don't see people hanging around because nobody hangs around here unless they have to. You feel watched without seeing anyone watching. That's the kind of place Medley is. Locals don't hype this town. They don't defend it loudly. They just tell you not to treat it casually. Get what you need. Keep your head up. Leave. Medley isn't dangerous because it's loud or aggressive. It's dangerous because it's invisible. And invisible places don't get corrected quickly. Medley doesn't want your attention. It wants to stay unnoticed, industrial, and efficient. But when locals warn you not to stop for gas here, they're not exaggerating. They're reading the room, and the room has very little furniture and even less patience. Florida isn't one place. It's dozens of realities stacked on top of each other. These towns don't advertise danger, they just live with it quietly. If locals warn you not to stop, it's not drama, it's experience. Like the video if you appreciate honesty over hype. Subscribe if you'd rather be warned than surprised.